When Clint Eastwood sat in her section, she had no clue her world was about to flip upside down. Mia adjusted her apron and glanced at the clock hanging above the diner's counter. It was nearing 7 p.m., the time when the dinner rush usually began to fade, leaving the pace slower as her shift neared its end. For most people, the little diner off the highway was nothing more than a pit stop, a place to grab a bite before continuing their journey. But for Mia, it was her lifeline. At 28, she juggled long hours here while raising her 6-year-old son, Jordan. Every tip and paycheck went toward keeping their modest apartment and covering Jordan's ever-growing list of school supplies. She moved smoothly from table to table, her warm smile a shield against the exhaustion that tugged at her. The regulars knew bits and pieces of her story. Some would quietly leave an extra $1 or $2 when they could, though Mia never sought anyone's sympathy. She'd learned long ago that life wasn't fair, and the only thing she could do was push forward. The bell above the door jingled, catching Mia's attention. Expecting to see another road-weary traveler, she looked up. But instead, a man entered with a quiet confidence that seemed to make the air in the room grow heavier. He wore a simple button-up shirt and jeans, his weathered face partly obscured by a hat pulled low over his eyes. For a moment, she just stared. But when his eyes met hers, she instantly recognized him. Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. Her breath caught. Mia wasn't the type to swoon over celebrities. She didn't have the time or energy for that. But this was different. Clint Eastwood wasn't just a name. He was a legend, someone her late father had admired and spoken of often as they watched old westerns together. For a fleeting moment, memories of those times flickered in her mind, but she quickly pushed them aside. Clint settled into a corner booth, and Mia realized it was her turn to serve him. This wasn't just any customer, though. Something about his calm, quiet presence made her pulse quicken. Grabbing her notepad and pen, she took a deep breath and walked over to him. As she got closer, she began noticing the little details, the slightly weathered yet steady hands resting on the table, the piercing eyes under the brim of his hat that seemed to see everything while revealing nothing. He looked up just as she reached the booth, his expression calm and unreadable. "Good evening," she began, surprised at how steady her voice sounded. "What can I get started for you?" He glanced at the menu briefly before setting it aside. "Just a coffee and a burger. Medium rare. No onions. Simple enough." Mia jotted it down quickly, but as she turned to leave, she noticed the faint tremor in her hand. Before she could take another step, Clint's voice stopped her. "Busy night?" he asked casually. Turning back, she blinked, surprised. Most customers didn't bother with small talk unless they were regulars. "Not too bad," she replied with a faint smile. "Keeps me on my toes." He nodded slightly, his expression softening just a bit. "You've got a good pace. Not easy to manage in a place like this." Her heart skipped. Was Clint Eastwood complimenting her? She managed a polite smile, unsure of what to say. This was Clint Eastwood, a man she'd only ever seen on screen, acknowledging her work. She excused herself politely and retreated to the counter to put in his order, her thoughts racing. Why was he here, in this tiny diner off the highway? He could dine in the finest restaurants in California, yet here he was, sipping water from a chipped glass and waiting for a burger like any other traveler. When the order was ready, Mia carefully carried the plate and coffee to his table, setting them down with precision. She caught a brief, appreciative glance from him. "Thank you," he said simply. "You're welcome," she replied, trying to sound casual, though something about the moment felt anything but ordinary. As Mia returned to serve other tables, she couldn't help but notice he wasn't in any hurry. He ate slowly, almost as if lost in thought, occasionally sipping his coffee. There was a contemplative air about him that seemed to linger, making the entire room feel quieter, heavier, as if something significant was happening just beneath the surface. But why did it feel like he wasn't just here for a meal? Something about his presence lingered in the back of her mind, a nagging feeling she couldn't shake. Mia kept busy refilling coffee cups, clearing tables, and taking new orders, but her eyes kept drifting back to Clint's booth. He ate slowly, almost deliberately, as though he had all the time in the world. Occasionally, their eyes would meet, and he'd offer her a polite nod, a silent acknowledgment that sent a flutter through her stomach. When he finished his meal, Clint raised his hand slightly to get her attention. Mia wiped her hands on her apron, composing herself before walking over. "Everything all right?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Perfect," he replied with a small smile. "That was one of the best burgers I've had in a long time." The unexpected compliment made her chuckle lightly. "I'll be sure to let the cook know. He'll be happy to hear that." For a moment, Clint said nothing. He just looked at her, and in that silence, it felt as though he was studying her, not in a critical way, but with a kind of curiosity that left her feeling both exposed and strangely seen. "You've got a good energy about you," he said finally. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." Mia blinked, unsure how to respond. Was this meant as a compliment? A memory? She couldn't tell. "Well, thank you," she managed, her cheeks warming slightly. "I just try to get through the day like everyone else." He nodded thoughtfully, his eyes glinting with something she couldn't quite place. "That's the trick, isn't it? Just getting through." Before she could say anything else, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, placing them on the table along with a folded piece of paper. "Keep the change," he said, rising from the booth. "And read this when you have a moment." Mia's heart pounded as she stared at the note. "Thank you," she said softly, though she wasn't sure if he even heard her as he walked toward the door. The bell above it jingled as he left, and just like that, he was gone. For a few moments, Mia stood frozen by the booth, her eyes fixed on the note as though it might burn her fingers. What could he have written? And why had he been so insistent that she read it? But her questions would have to wait. There were still tables to serve, and Mia wasn't one to leave her work unfinished, no matter how much her mind raced with anticipation. By the time she cleared Clint's booth, the diner had quieted down. The last few customers were sipping their coffee or chatting softly, while the jukebox hummed faintly in the background. She picked up the folded note with trembling fingers, slipping it into her apron pocket as she finished cleaning the table. Why did she feel so anxious? It was just a note, wasn't it? When her shift ended, Mia retreated to the back room to gather her things. Her curiosity finally got the better of her. With a deep breath, she pulled the note from her pocket and carefully unfolded it. Her eyes skimmed the first few lines, and her breath caught. "Dear Mia, I don't know much about you, but in the short time I've been here, I've seen something rare, true resilience. Watching how you manage this place with grace, even under pressure, reminds me of how much strength exists in the everyday heroes of this world. You remind me of someone very dear to me, someone who taught me the value of hard work and kindness. I don't know your story, but I can see it in your eyes. You've carried more than your share of burdens. That's why I want to do something for you. No strings attached." Mia's hands trembled as she continued reading the note. "I'm leaving you a small gesture to use however you wish, whether it's for your child, your future, or simply to find a moment of rest. I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you." Folded inside the note was a check. Mia's breath caught in her chest as her eyes locked on the amount, $10,000. Her knees gave way, and she sat down hard on the bench in the back room, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face. It wasn't just about the money, though it was undeniably life-changing. It was the words, the recognition, and the thoughtfulness that overwhelmed her. Someone as legendary and accomplished as Clint Eastwood had noticed her, a person who often felt invisible in the hustle of life. He'd cared enough to leave her a gesture that wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. As she sat there, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions, one question kept circling her mind. Why me? And more importantly, what would I do with this unexpected blessing? The check in her hands felt surreal, like something out of a dream. Her thoughts raced to the stack of unpaid bills cluttering her kitchen counter, the worn-out sneakers her son, Jordan, had been wearing for months, and the leaky faucet in their cramped apartment that she could never afford to fix. This money could solve so many problems. But Clint's words lingered. You remind me of someone very dear to me. Who was that person? And what had made Clint Eastwood, of all people, see something so special in her? It wasn't just the money or the note. It was the way he had looked at her earlier, with a respect and recognition she hadn't felt in years. Wiping her tears, Mia inhaled deeply, trying to steady herself. She couldn't keep this to herself. She needed to share this moment with someone who had been by her side through thick and thin. Without hesitation, she called her best friend, Tosha. Within minutes, Tosha arrived at the diner, sliding into one of the empty booths across from Mia. "Wait. Hold up," Tosha said, raising her hands as Mia passed her the note. "You're telling me Clint Eastwood gave you this?" Mia nodded, her eyes still red and swollen from crying. "I don't even know why. I didn't do anything special." Tosha silently read the note, her expression growing more astonished with each word. When she unfolded the check, her jaw nearly dropped. Letting out a low whistle, she said, "Girl, this is unreal. Do you even know what this could mean for you and Jordan?" "I know," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "But it doesn't feel real. Why would someone like him care about someone like me?" Tosha reached across the table, taking Mia's hands firmly. "Because he saw you, Mia. He saw what I've seen all along. You work harder than anyone I've ever met. And no matter what life throws at you, you keep going. That kind of strength. People notice it." Mia looked down at the check, her heart swelling with gratitude. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time they weren't just from shock or disbelief. They were from the deep appreciation of being truly seen for the first time in years. But along with the gratitude came doubt. What if I don't deserve this? What if this is some kind of mistake? "It's not a mistake," Tosha said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You do deserve it. The real question is, what are you going to do with it?" And that was the question, wasn't it? As much as Mia wanted to feel joy, she couldn't ignore the weight of this unexpected gift, or the responsibility it carried. That night, long after Jordan had gone to bed, Mia sat at the small kitchen table, the note and check spread out before her. The apartment was quiet except for the occasional creak of old pipes, and the dim light above her flickered faintly. Her thoughts swirled in 1,000 directions. This money could pay off their overdue rent, replace the unreliable car she depended on, and open doors for Jordan, opportunities she had only ever dreamed of. But even as she imagined the possibilities, they frightened her. She picked up the note again, reading Clint's words for what felt like the 10th time. "I hope it brings you some peace. People like you deserve to be seen, and I see you." Those words hit deeper than she had expected. How many years had she spent just trying to keep her head above water? She'd worked double shifts, skipped meals so Jordan wouldn't have to, and pushed herself to exhaustion more times than she could count. Through it all, she'd felt invisible, like the world didn't care whether she made it or not. But Clint Eastwood had seen her. He had recognized her struggle, her determination, her resilience. And in that moment, she realized this wasn't just about the money. It was about believing she was worthy of something better. Mia thought of her father, her greatest supporter before he passed. He used to tell her, "Don't let the world wear you down, kid. You've got a fire in you." For the first time in years, she felt that fire flicker again. She pulled out a notepad and began jotting ideas, possibilities that could create lasting change. Maybe she could finally take an accounting class, a dream she'd put on hold for so long. Maybe she could start a small college fund for Jordan, giving him a chance at a brighter future. But one idea kept coming back, louder than the rest, paying it forward. Clint's gesture had changed her life, and she couldn't ignore the pull to do the same for someone else. Still, the uncertainty lingered. The road ahead seemed daunting. But for the first time in a long while, Mia allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years: hope. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window as Mia sipped her coffee, watching Jordan play with his action figures on the worn carpet. The check and note rested neatly folded on the table, a reminder of the life-changing night before. After a sleepless night of reflection, she had made her decision. The first person she called was Tosha. Tosha didn't hesitate. "I'll watch Jordan for you. Do whatever you need to do, girl. I've got you." With Jordan happily settled at Tosha's house, Mia drove to the bank. The check felt heavy in her purse, its presence almost surreal. At the bank, the teller, a young woman with a cheerful smile, raised her eyebrows slightly when she saw the amount. "That's quite a deposit," she said politely, her tone betraying a hint of curiosity. But the teller didn't push further, and Mia offered a small, polite smile. "It's a gift," she said simply. As the check cleared, Mia felt a whirlwind of emotions: relief, excitement, and a profound sense of responsibility. This wasn't just money. It was a chance to reshape her life and give Jordan the future he deserved. After leaving the bank, she found herself driving to the local community college. 4 years she'd walked by its campus, always wondering what it might feel like to sit in a classroom again, to learn and grow. With trembling hands, she stepped inside and approached the admissions desk. A kind-faced woman greeted her with a warm smile. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to enroll," Mia said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "In accounting." The woman's smile widened. "You're in the right place. Let's get you started." As Mia filled out the paperwork, a sense of purpose began to replace her anxiety. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about showing Jordan that it's never too late to pursue your dreams, no matter how far out of reach they might seem. Walking out of the admissions office, a new thought struck her. What if this wasn't just a gift? What if it was the spark to ignite something much bigger? Weeks turned into months, and Mia's life began to transform in ways she hadn't thought possible. She juggled her shifts at the diner with evening classes at the community college. The balance wasn't easy, but her stride carried a determination she hadn't felt in years. Even Jordan noticed the change. He'd proudly tell his friends, "My mom's going to college." Every time she heard it, Mia couldn't help but smile. But her journey wasn't just about improving her own life. Inspired by Clint's gesture, Mia began setting aside a portion of the money to quietly help others in her community. Whether it was groceries for a struggling single parent or textbooks for a student in need, she found ways to give back, embodying the kindness Clint's note had encouraged. One evening, as she pored over her accounting textbook at the kitchen table, Jordan tugged at her sleeve. "Mom," he asked, his big brown eyes curious, "do you think that man will ever come back to the diner?" Mia paused, caught off guard by the question. Would Clint Eastwood ever return? She didn't know. But one thing was certain: his impact on her life was permanent. "Maybe," she said softly, ruffling Jordan's hair. "But even if he doesn't, He's always going to be part of our story. And that was the truth. Clint's gesture had reminded her of the transformative power of kindness, the ability to see someone for who they truly are and lift them up when the weight of the world feels too heavy. It reignited her belief in herself, in the endless possibilities life could offer, and in the importance of paying it forward. That night, as Mia closed her textbook and prepared for bed, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Her journey was far from over, but for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, one determined step at a time. From that day forward, every time a stranger entered her section at the diner, Mia greeted them with the same warmth and grace she always had. Only now, she understood the power of even the smallest interaction. Because every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the potential to create ripples far beyond what we can see. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration today. This heartwarming story follows Mia, a single mother working tirelessly at a small diner to provide for her son, Jordan. Her life takes an unexpected turn when legendary actor Clint Eastwood enters her section and leaves behind a gift that changes everything: a $10,000 check and a heartfelt note recognizing her resilience. What unfolds is a journey of hope, transformation, and the power of kindness as Mia not only rebuilds her life, but also pays it forward to others in her community. Sparkles watch until the end to discover how one act of kindness can create ripples of change. Backhand index pointing right. Don't forget to like, thumbs up, share counterclockwise button, and subscribe bell to inspire others with this incredible tale of hope and perseverance.